The world saw the perfect celebrity. Beautiful, famous, untouchable. But behind the flashing cameras and sold-out stadiums, Taylor Swift was struggling in ways most people couldn't see. And it wasn't just the pressure of fame. It was the feeling of always being watched and judged. For years, people picked apart her appearance, online, in magazines, and across social media. Every photo sparked comments. Every small change in her body became a conversation. Over time, those outside voices started turning into her own inner voice too. This is the story of how fame, impossible beauty standards, and non-stop public judgment pushed one of the biggest stars in the world into a quiet battle with body image, self-worth, and disordered eating. The obsession with female celebrities has become deeply cruel. Women in the spotlight are expected to stay beautiful, thin, desirable, and flawless at all times, while millions of strangers sit back and decide whether they measure up. One photo, one outfit, one angle, and suddenly their bodies become public discussion. Taylor Swift grew up inside that environment. She entered the industry as a teenager, long before she had the emotional tools to protect herself from that kind of pressure. And like so many young girls raised under constant attention, she slowly started believing her appearance determined her worth. Praise made her feel valuable. Criticism made her feel like she had failed. Years later, she admitted that the endless comments about her body affected her far more than people realized. Some of them stayed with her for years. One moment in particular never left her. When Taylor was only 18, a magazine published a story suggesting she looked pregnant because her stomach wasn't perfectly flat in a certain dress. To everyone else, it was just another careless celebrity headline, something people scrolled past and forgot. But for her, it felt humiliating, like her body was being turned into a mistake that needed to be fixed.
For many people, eating disorders are never really about food. Food is just the surface of something much deeper. They often begin with emotional pain, anxiety, pressure, insecurity, loneliness, or the exhausting need to feel accepted. For Taylor Swift, her relationship with food became tied to the way she emotionally processed the world around her. The praise made her feel worthy. The criticism made her feel like she was failing. And in an industry like Hollywood, thinness is constantly rewarded. People praised her for fitting into tiny sample-sized dresses. They admired how small she looked. Headlines celebrated her appearance as if being thinner somehow made her more successful, more disciplined, more valuable. Over time, her mind began connecting those things together. Thinness meant approval.
Approval meant safety. Safety meant acceptance. Without even realizing it, the validation became addictive. What once may have felt unhealthy slowly started feeling normal. The warning signs became harder to recognize because the world around her kept rewarding the behavior. And that's one of the most dangerous parts of an eating disorder. Sometimes the suffering is hidden behind compliments.
For years, nobody really knew what Taylor Swift was going through behind the scenes. That's the hard truth about eating disorders. They don't always look like struggle. Someone can seem successful, disciplined, and fine, while quietly suffering inside. And often, those very traits get praised. In her documentary, Miss Americana, Taylor shared that seeing photos of herself sometimes made her stop eating, not for health or fitness, but out of fear of not being seen as attractive enough. Even during the peak of her career, when stadiums were full and the world was cheering her name, she was privately restricting food, over-exercising, and feeling physically weak on stage. And still, almost no one noticed. Because when someone is smiling and succeeding, the world assumes they're okay, even when they're not.
Eating disorders are complex mental health conditions that go far beyond food or weight.
They're often rooted in control, perfectionism, anxiety, shame, and the belief that self-worth depends on how others see you. Under constant public attention, that pressure can become intense. For celebrities, every photo, outfit, and physical change is judged online, making appearance feel tied to acceptance and value. Praise can feel soothing, while criticism can feel deeply painful. Over time, behaviors that seem like self-improvement can quietly turn harmful. In a world of non-stop visibility, especially through media and social platforms, this level of scrutiny has become normal, even though human beings were never meant to live under it.
Eating disorders aren't just unhealthy habits or choices about food. Medically, they're recognized as serious mental health conditions that can affect almost every system in the body. When the mind becomes trapped in a cycle of restriction, fear, and constant preoccupation with body image, the body is pushed into a prolonged state of stress, almost as if it's always trying to survive a threat. Over time, sustained undereating or starvation can take a heavy toll. It can slow the heart rate, weaken muscles, disrupt hormones, and affect basic functions like memory and concentration. Emotionally, it can intensify anxiety, deepen depression, and make it harder to feel stable or grounded. But the impact doesn't stop at the physical body. Malnutrition also affects the brain itself. Thoughts can become more rigid, more obsessive, especially around food, weight, and appearance. What once felt like concern can slowly turn into something consuming and hard to escape. One of the most painful parts is how closely eating disorders are tied to perfectionism and self-worth.
Even when the body is clearly struggling, the mind can still whisper that it isn't enough. That belief can become so strong that people continue harmful behaviors even as their health declines. Experts often describe eating disorders as conditions that distort perception itself. A person can be severely unwell and still look in the mirror and feel inadequate, or believe they need to do more, lose more, or be better. That's what makes these illnesses so deeply damaging. They don't just affect the body, they change the way a person sees themselves, often for a long time.
Somnological pain becomes dangerous when it starts to feel normal. Over time, you stop seeing it as something wrong. It just becomes life. Taylor Swift once shared that she thought exhaustion was just part of success. Weakness was something to accept, and even hunger felt like discipline. When someone is struggling, they often rewrite their pain so it feels less serious, like control or effort instead of harm. And many only see it as a problem once everything falls apart, even if they're already suffering. On the outside, she seemed confident. On the inside, nothing ever felt enough. No success, no appearance, no achievement could quiet the fear of being judged. That gap between how someone looks and how they feel is often where the real struggle lives.
For a long time, Taylor Swift kept her struggles with food and body image private, partly due to stigma, and partly because these topics often make people uncomfortable to talk about. When she eventually spoke about it openly, it had a powerful impact. It reached many people who had silently been dealing with the same feelings, tying their self-worth to appearance, feeling pressure to be perfect, and constantly trying to meet impossible standards. Her honesty helped others feel less alone. It highlighted how common these struggles are, especially in a world where social media constantly shapes how people see themselves and others. At the core of it all is just a human being trying to cope with overwhelming expectations while being watched and judged by millions. Growing up in the public eye only magnifies that pressure. Behind every perfect image online, there are often quiet struggles with body image, anxiety, and self-worth that no one else can see. We all want acceptance, but chasing perfection never really gives it. It only creates more pressure until you start losing yourself in the process. And sometimes, Healing begins with one simple truth. You were never meant to be perfect in the first place.